Why were the guards laughing at the gate instead of watching the road? Sarah noticed it before she even parked. Two soldiers, barely out of their 20s, standing behind a security barrier, talking, grinning, gesturing with their hands, oblivious. The morning sun hung low over the desert base, and the heat shimmered against the razor wire fence. A faint smell of dust and oil drifted on the wind. From a distance, it all looked calm, too calm. She sat for a long second behind the wheel of her rental car, her hand resting on the ID badge tucked deep inside her blazer. No insignia, no stars, just another civilian face behind a steering wheel. That was the point. Her orders had come in quietly, through channels that didn't make small talk. Relieve command at Forward Operating Base Henderson effective immediately. Full operational authority. A simple line, backed by 100 implications. The last commander had been removed. Discipline had cracked. Morale had dipped low enough to reach the Pentagon's desk. Now she was the fix, or the warning shot. Sarah adjusted the rearview mirror. The reflection staring back was calm, maybe even composed, but the eyes carried weight. 38 years old, 2 deployments, 3 commands, 1,000 decisions she could never unmake. She smoothed her black blazer and stepped out of the car. The sound of gravel under her shoes broke the morning stillness. Ahead, the 2 guards were still talking, their rifles slung lazily across their shoulders. No one called halt, no one moved. That told her everything. She'd deliberately chosen to arrive unannounced, dressed like a contractor, to see how the base really functioned when it didn't know it was being watched. Now she was getting her answer before she even said a word. As she approached, she took in details the way a surgeon reads vital signs. The guard booth's monitor glowed with the unmistakable blue-white tint of a social media feed. A half-drunk bottle of soda sat on the counter. The perimeter fence had grass growing too close, a perfect spot for anyone with bad intentions to hide a device. It wasn't chaos, it was worse. It was complacency. She stopped 3 feet from the checkpoint. Neither soldier had noticed. The taller one, name-tag Johnson, finally turned his head, blinking in surprise. "Oh, ma'am, you here for the family day thing?" he said, his tone light, almost cheerful. "That's actually next weekend. Civilian visitors gotta go around the other side. There's signs." Sarah didn't answer right away. Silence was its own kind of test. The shorter one, Rodriguez, leaned on the booth's doorframe and added, "Yeah, ma'am, the civilian entrance is over on the west gate. This one's for active personnel." The words rolled out casually. 2 soldiers, 2 rifle, 0 situational awareness. Sarah kept her voice soft, calm, controlled. "I'm here on official business." They both paused, but not for long. Johnson shrugged, smiling awkwardly. "Right, totally get it, but base security's kinda strict. You'll still have to head to the visitor's entrance, ma'am. Rules and all that." "Rules?" She almost smiled at that. He was quoting rules to her, without following a single one. Her hand slipped into her purse, fingers brushing against the cool edge of her military ID card, but she didn't show it yet. She wanted to see how far they'd go. "Suppose I did have business," she said evenly. "Suppose I wasn't here for family day. What's the first thing you'd do?" Rodriguez frowned, caught off guard. Ask for ID, I guess." "Did you?" He blinked, the smile fell. Johnson looked down at his boots. "No, ma'am," he admitted quietly. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that presses down until someone cracks. But Sarah said nothing. She just stood there, the breeze shifting her hair slightly, her eyes steady. This wasn't anger, this was observation. A test, and they were failing it in real time. She could have ended it right there, flashed her credentials, declared her rank, but she wanted them to see what they'd done, what not paying attention really looked like. She pulled out her phone instead, pretending to check a message. "Hold one moment," she said, stepping slightly aside but still within the security line. The younger guard's voice wavered. "Ma'am, you can't be inside the gate perimeter. Please step back." But it was too late. She'd already dialed. "Major Thompson," she said, her voice measured, clear, and loud enough for them to hear every word. "This is Colonel Sarah Martinez. I'm at the main gate of Fob Henderson. Could you notify the acting commander that I'll require an immediate escort?" The air changed. Like the world realized what it had just heard. Johnson's face turned pale. Rodriguez froze, eyes wide. "Colonel." It took them a second to process it. She ended the call slowly, slipped the phone away, and turned back toward the checkpoint. "Now," she said quietly, "would you like to see my identification?" The young guard swallowed. "Yes, ma'am, absolutely, ma'am." His voice cracked. Sarah handed him her ID card. His hands trembled slightly as he read it. His posture straightened, his tone shifting from casual to crisp in seconds. "Colonel Martinez, ma'am, I didn't realize." "That," she interrupted softly, "is exactly the problem." Behind her, a Jeep engine rumbled. Someone had finally radioed the duty officer. Good. At least that part of the chain of command still worked. Sarah watched their expressions, the confusion, the shame, the dawning understanding that this wasn't a random civilian anymore. She didn't yell, she didn't need to. Authority, when real, doesn't shout, it simply is. "What's your first responsibility when anyone approaches this checkpoint?" she asked. Rodriguez's voice was almost a whisper. "Request identification and verify authorization, ma'am." "And what did you do?" "Silence." Sarah let it hang there, the kind of silence that burns deeper than anger. Then she turned her gaze toward the distance, the glint of sunlight off hangars, the low hum of base life waking up. She remembered something an old mentor once told her, back when she was a lieutenant. Security isn't about suspicion, it's about respect for the mission, for the people you protect. Looking at these two, she realized they'd forgotten that truth. And it wasn't just their fault. It was the base's fault. The culture, the command, the slow erosion that happens when vigilance turns to routine. A man jogged toward them now, crisp uniform, sharp posture, breath steady but urgent. Staff sergeant stripes. The difference between soldiering and slouching made visible in every step. He stopped, saluted, and said, "Ma'am, I'm Staff Sergeant Williams, duty officer. I understand there been a misunderstanding." Sarah returned the salute. "That's one way to describe it, Sergeant." Johnson and Rodriguez were at rigid attention now, like statues under sunlight. Too late for that, she thought, but maybe not too late to learn. "I'm Colonel Sarah Martinez," she said. "Effective immediately, I'm assuming command of this base." The words hit harder than any reprimand could. Williams blinked once, twice, then nodded quickly. "Understood, ma'am, completely understood." He turned to the guards. "You two realize what you've just done?" "Yes, Sergeant," they answered in shaky unison. Sarah folded her hands behind her back. Her tone softened, but her eyes remained steady. "You made assumptions instead of following procedure. You judged by appearance. You let conversation distract you from your post, and today it just happened to be me." She stepped closer, her voice low enough to make them listen. "But what if it hadn't been?" Rodriguez's throat tightened. "Ma'am." She stopped him gently with a raised hand. "Learn from this, both of you. The enemy doesn't always look like the threat you expect." Behind her, the sound of a vehicle approached, the acting commander's sedan, small flags fluttering on the hood. The Jeep door opened and a tall officer stepped out. His voice carried calm authority. "Colonel Martinez, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, acting base commander. Welcome to Henderson, ma'am." Sarah turned toward him, extending her hand. "Thank you, Colonel, and thank you for responding quickly." Hayes's handshake was firm, his eyes sharp, the kind that noticed details. She respected that. Her tone, though still even, carried a quiet edge. "Colonel, I think you and I have a great deal to discuss." She looked back at the guards once more, the two young men who would spend the rest of their careers remembering this moment. "Soldiers," she said softly, "you'll be fine, but you're going to train harder than you ever have before." They both nodded. Then she turned to Hayes. "Let's take a drive. I'd like to see what else I need to fix." The sedan door shut behind her, the hum of the engine blending with the distant rhythm of base life, a world that was about to change, one checkpoint at a time. As the car rolled forward through the gates, Sarah glanced back through the window, at the two guards standing straight, their faces red, their lesson burned in for life. In the stillness of her mind, she thought, sometimes the first test isn't the enemy outside the fence, it's the discipline inside it. And for the first time that day, she allowed herself the smallest, most fleeting smile. She didn't speak for the first few minutes of the drive. The hum of the vehicle, the steady vibration beneath her boots, and the faint rattle of the radio filled the silence. Outside, the base stretched in ordered lines of concrete and steel. Hangars, motor pools, barracks, all of it neat enough on paper, but Sarah's eyes caught the small things that didn't fit. A formation line unevenly marked. A flag slightly off-center. A soldier slouched while walking across the tarmac. None of it was catastrophic, but all of it was familiar. Complacency, she thought, the quiet enemy that kills before anyone realizes there's a war. Hayes cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I'd like to apologize again for the situation at the gate. It's not representative of how we operate." "Lieutenant Colonel," she interrupted softly, "I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to understand." He nodded, glancing at her sidelong. His posture was proper, but there was a weariness behind his voice that told her he'd been keeping things afloat longer than anyone wanted to admit. They passed a group of mechanics working near the motor pool. One waved casually at the vehicle without saluting. Hayes didn't notice. Sarah did. "You've been acting commander how long?" she asked. "2 months, ma'am, since Colonel Weber was relieved." "In morale?" He hesitated. "Low, if I'm being honest. Discipline slipped. We've had a few incidents." Incidents? The military word for problems no one wants to describe out loud. Sarah looked out the window again, the training yard, the barracks courtyard. Soldiers moving with an unhurried rhythm that spoke of routine, not readiness. She'd seen this before. Bases where the war had ended on paper but still echoed in the walls. Soldiers trained to fight but forced to wait months, years, with nothing but repetition. And when nothing happens long enough, the sharp edges dull. She turned to Hayes. "What kind of incidents?" He exhaled. "Missed drills, security gaps, one unauthorized access to a restricted zone, no malicious intent, just carelessness." Sarah's brow tightened. "And the previous commander?" Hayes kept his eyes on the road. He was good on paper, but he wanted to be everyone's friend. The troops liked him too much. That told her everything. When command becomes comfortable, danger follows quietly. The vehicle turned down the main avenue leading to the administrative complex. Soldiers stepped aside to let them pass. Some stared, recognizing Hayes's car, but not the unfamiliar civilian woman beside him. They didn't know yet. They would. Inside the vehicle, the silence pressed in again. Sarah studied Hayes carefully. He was competent, maybe even loyal, but tired, like a man trying to hold a dam that had already cracked. "Tell me about your staff," she said finally. "Good people, ma'am, capable," but he trailed off. "But some have gotten used to things being relaxed." She nodded once. "That ends today." Her tone was soft but absolute. Hayes didn't argue. He just nodded again, eyes steady on the road. When they pulled up in front of headquarters, Sarah stepped out and inhaled deeply. The air smelled faintly of jet fuel and sunburned metal. Soldiers walked by, glancing curiously at her plain clothes, wondering who she was. She let them wonder. Inside the building, the cool air carried the hum of computers and distant conversation. Hayes led her down a corridor lined with photos of past commanders, men and women, some smiling, some stern. The last photo frame was empty. She paused in front of it. When was this taken down? 3 weeks ago, Hayes replied quietly, after Colonel Weber's removal. Why hasn't it been replaced? He hesitated again. Tradition says we wait until the new commander formally takes over, ma'am. Sarah studied the empty frame. A mirror without a reflection. A symbol of absence, waiting to be filled. The temporary office Hayes had prepared was simple but efficient desk, 2 chairs, a window overlooking the parade field. The blinds were half-drawn, cutting sunlight into disciplined lines across the floor. She sat resting her ID on the desk. Let be clear, Colonel, I'm not here to embarrass anyone, but I am here to fix what's broken. Every missed detail, every lazy standard that ends. Yes, ma'am, Hayes said. There was no resistance in his voice, only relief. Sarah looked at him. You're going to help me do it. He nodded once, of course. Good, start by gathering your senior staff. 1,400 hours. I want everyone in that room, department heads, training, security, comms, logistics. If they wear a Major's Oak leaves or higher, I want them there. Yes, ma'am. As he turned to leave, Sarah added quietly, and Colonel, don't warn them why. He paused, understanding, understood. When he was gone, the room fell silent except for the faint ticking of a wall clock. Sarah sat back, exhaling slowly. The adrenaline from the gate encounter had faded, leaving a calm stillness in its place, the kind that always came after making a first impression that would echo through every hallway. She looked out the window. From here she could see the outer fence, the checkpoint where it had all begun. 2 small figures, Johnson and Rodriguez, still stood there, their posture unnaturally perfect now. She almost pitied them, almost. But maybe they'll remember this, she thought. Maybe that's how it starts, one mistake that teaches 100 others. She remembered being 20 herself. The first time she'd been corrected by a senior officer, a single quiet word that had stuck with her for years. Observe more, assume less. She still lived by it. That was what leadership was, not speeches, not power. It was knowing when silence spoke louder than anything. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from Major Thompson, base personnel officer. Welcome, ma'am. Files ready for your review. She opened them on the tablet Hayes had left for her. Names, reports, statistics, pages of numbers that told a story only commanders knew how to read. Readiness, 78%. Equipment maintenance, overdue by 12%. Training compliance, inconsistent. Individually, those numbers meant nothing. But together, they formed a pattern, the slow decay of discipline that happens when good people stop being led well. Her finger hovered over one name, Corporal Davis. Assigned to Gate 3. Recent commendation for alertness during a previous drill. At least one name gave her hope. She made a note to remember it. By the time 1,400 hours approached, the conference room was ready. 12 officers sat in silence, the air thick with anticipation. Word had already spread about the incident at the gate and about the woman who'd caused it. Sarah stepped in without ceremony. No uniform, no ribbons, just authority in motion. Every officer stood. Please sit, she said. Her tone carried neither warmth nor coldness, only clarity. They obeyed instantly. She let a few seconds pass before speaking again. I'm Colonel Sarah Martinez. As of this morning, I am your new commanding officer. Her gaze moved across the table, faces filled with curiosity, anxiety, defiance. I know some of you already heard how I arrived. That story is true. I came in unannounced, out of uniform, to see how this base really functions when no one's watching. No one moved. What I found was not discipline. It was assumption. Two young soldiers believed I was a civilian and sent me away without checking credentials. They didn't break procedure out of malice. They broke it because no one had made them afraid to. She leaned forward slightly, and that's on leadership. The officers shifted in their seats. Hayes kept his face neutral, but his eyes betrayed approval. Sarah continued, her voice calm but deliberate. This base isn't broken, it's distracted. And distraction kills more soldiers than bullets ever will. I've seen it. I've buried it. A pause. The sound of the air conditioner filled the space where emotion had been held back. I'm not here to punish mistakes, she said softly. I'm here to end habits. You all know what those are. One officer, Major Thompson, spoke carefully. Ma'am, what do you want us to do first? Sarah looked at him. Listen. The single word hit like a command. Listen to what your soldiers aren't saying. Watch what they stop caring about. That's where rot begins. No one took notes. They didn't need to. Every word etched itself deeper than paper. She straightened. From today forward, standards rise. That includes me. That includes you. And if that makes some of you uncomfortable, good. It means you still care. Then she let her tone soften just slightly. I don't expect perfection. I expect effort, the kind that doesn't need supervision. She took a slow breath, scanning their faces. Any questions? No one spoke. Good. Then we begin. As the officers filed out, Hayes lingered. Ma'am, they'll respect you, eventually. Sarah gave a faint, knowing smile. Respect isn't the goal, Colonel. Readiness is. Respect follows when people remember why they wear the uniform. He nodded, understanding. When he left, she stood alone in the quiet conference room, staring out through the blinds toward the airfield. The same one she'd flown from years ago, before command, before titles. The sun dipped low, painting the horizon in amber light. In that glow, she thought about her first real command, the one that hadn't gone perfectly. The one where she'd lost a soldier because someone, somewhere, had assumed the safety checks were done. It wasn't her fault, not entirely. But leadership doesn't ask for partial blame. It takes all of it. She still saw that soldier's face sometimes. And maybe that's why she'd come here. To make sure it never happened again. Outside, a faint breeze carried through the open window, fluttering the blinds like a flag. The base was quiet, watchful, waiting for its new commander to show what leadership really looked like. And deep down, Sarah knew, the real test hadn't even begun. The meeting hadn't been over for 10 minutes when the knock came. Hard, urgent, the kind that told Sarah before the door even opened something was wrong. Staff Sergeant Williams stood there, breath controlled but eyes sharp. Ma'am, we've got a situation at Gate 3. She didn't need details yet. The tone said enough. What kind of situation? Unidentified vehicle, government plates. 3 occupants claiming to be Pentagon inspectors. No paperwork, no notice, and they're refusing to wait for verification. Sarah was already moving. Are the guards following procedure? Yes, ma'am. That single answer tightened her focus like a lens, snapping into clarity. Good, let's make sure it stays that way. They stepped into the afternoon glare. The base shimmered under the weight of heat, mirage lines blurring the distant fence. The vehicle hummed across the cracked asphalt toward the far gate. Williams briefed her in clipped sentences, professional but tense. They say their names are Morrison, Tate, and Lennox. Morrison's doing the talking. Claims to be a deputy assistant secretary. Says the delay's unacceptable. Sarah stared out the windshield. Pentagon doesn't send deputies in sedans with no escort. No, ma'am. Then let's find out who they really are. Gate 3 came into view, a narrow road flanked by chain link and concrete barriers. Beyond it, a black government-issue sedan idled in the no-man's land between outer and inner gates, the engine still running. Two guards stood firm at the checkpoint, posture straight, rifles ready but relaxed, not aggressive, controlled. Sarah recognized one immediately from her earlier files, Corporal Davis. He'd been the exception, the one who got it right. Good. She stepped out before the car had stopped moving. The heat hit like a wall, the air thick with the smell of dust and oil. Corporal Davis, she called, report. Davis turned, saluting. Ma'am, these individuals are insisting on entry. We've denied until verification. We've already contacted Pentagon Directory and Inspector General's office for confirmation. Response: none yet, ma'am. Sarah nodded. Maintain posture. No one moves that gate until I say so. The man from the sedan was already striding toward her, tall, thin, silver hair catching the light. His suit was too sharp for this place. The desert dust hadn't even touched his shoes. He didn't wait for permission. Are you the commanding officer? I am, she said simply. Finally, he snapped. I'm Deputy Assistant Secretary Morrison, Department of Defense. These guards are obstructing an official inspection. Open the gate. Sarah didn't blink. Do you have authorization papers? Morrison's nostrils flared. Colonel, I don't have time for games. You're required to grant access to Pentagon inspectors on demand. She let the silence stretch. That's true, once we confirm you are Pentagon inspectors. His jaw tightened. Are you questioning the Department of Defense? I'm protecting it. The words were calm, precise, deliberate. Behind him, the two men near the car exchanged glances. One checked his watch, the other scanned the tree line. Sarah caught it in the corner of her eye and felt the faintest pulse of adrenaline. They were waiting for something. Sergeant Williams, she said quietly, run the plate on that vehicle. Contact base intel, full trace. Yes, ma'am. Morrison stepped closer, voice dropping. Colonel Martinez, you're making a serious mistake. When I report this to my superiors, there will be consequences. She studied him, her mind cataloging every inconsistency. Tone too aggressive, ID too quick to flash, the badge laminate too glossy, edges uneven. Cheap. Real Pentagon officials never acted insulted by security. They lived by it. She spoke softly, almost kindly. Sir, if you are who you say you are, this will take 5 minutes. If you're not, 5 minutes is more than you deserve. Morrison's eyes flickered, just for a heartbeat, but she saw it, the crack behind the mask. The radio on Davis's vest crackled. Gate 3, this is security control. Still no record of inspection scheduled for Henderson. Verifying credentials, stand by. Davis acknowledged, copy standing by. Sarah watched Morrison carefully. His two companions were growing restless, whispering now, their shoulders shifting. Sir, she said, I suggest you tell your men to stay by the vehicle. They're not my. He stopped himself too late. Sarah's voice dropped almost a whisper. Then who are they? The sound of the radio cut through again. Control to Gate 3. Pentagon verification complete. No record of a Deputy Assistant Secretary Morrison. Repeat, no record found. No inspection scheduled anywhere in region. For a second, everything froze. Morrison's expression emptied. His skin went pale beneath the desert sun. Sir, Sarah said evenly, I'm going to have to ask you to remain here until we clarify this discrepancy. Morrison took one slow step backward. There's no discrepancy. There's been a misunderstanding. We'll just leave. Corporal Davis, she said, no one leaves this gate. Yes, ma'am. Williams was already on the radio. Military police, this is Gate 3. Immediate assistance. 3 suspects, fraudulent identification, possible infiltration attempt. The words carried through the open air like a flare. Morrison's companions moved first, bolting toward the brush beside the road. "Hold your fire," Sarah shouted. "No shots unless fired upon." 2 guards sprinted after them, the rustle of boots fading into the trees. Morrison turned to run, but Davis stepped in front of him, rifle lowered but firm. "Sir, don't." Morrison froze, breathing hard. "You don't understand. This isn't what you think." Sarah approached slowly, every sense tuned sharp. "Then help me understand." He looked at her then, not as an officer, not as an opponent, but as someone who just realized the game was over. His voice cracked. "We were supposed to get in quietly, that's all I know." "Quietly for what?" He didn't answer. The distant sound of sirens, military police vehicles, grew louder, closing in fast. Dust rose in spirals along the fence line. Sarah kept her eyes on him. "You're done running, Mr. Morrison." He swallowed, shoulders sagging. "It's not my name." The MPs arrived in a storm of gravel and flashing lights. 4 soldiers spilled out, weapons ready but controlled. The senior MP, Staff Sergeant Jackson, approached Sarah. "Ma'am, situation." Suspect attempted unauthorized access. 2 accomplices fled east. Fraudulent credentials confirmed. Jackson nodded, motioning to his team. "Cuff him." Morrison didn't resist. His voice, when it came, was almost pleading. "You don't understand. We were told the commander was compromised. We were supposed to." Sarah cut him off. "Save it for federal agents." The MPs led him toward the vehicle, securing his wrists with plastic restraints. The shift from arrogance to fear was almost instantaneous. Williams returned, breath measured. "Search teams are tracking the others, ma'am. Looks like they had secondary transport waiting near the outer road." Sarah exhaled, the weight of tension easing just enough to let the next thought surface. "If I hadn't come through that gate this morning, they might have gotten in." She glanced at Davis. "Corporal, you did everything right." "Just following the book, ma'am." "Exactly." She looked back at Morrison being loaded into the MP vehicle. "Sometimes the book saves lives." Within the hour, the checkpoint transformed into a controlled storm. Intel officers, MPs, and FBI liaisons arriving in unmarked SUVs. Radios buzzed. Drones circled overhead, scanning the perimeter. Sarah briefed the lead investigator, Special Agent Rebecca Chen, a sharp-eyed woman with calm authority. "So let me get this straight," Chen said. "You arrived unannounced this morning, discovered a lapse at Gate 1, corrected it, and by afternoon the same base prevented an infiltration at Gate 3. Sarah nodded. "Coincidence seems unlikely." Chen agreed. "We think your unexpected arrival threw off their timing. They were probably watching procedures, waiting for a window. So I disrupted their plan by accident." "Or instinct," Chen said. "Either way, it worked." The words should have felt satisfying. They didn't. Because beneath the relief was something else, a cold understanding of how close they'd come to disaster. By evening, the heat had faded into gold light. The chaos at the gate had settled into routine investigation, agents taking statements, MPs cataloging evidence. Morrison sat in the back of a transport, silent, hands cuffed, eyes hollow. His expensive suit looked wrong under the harsh orange glow. Sarah watched him for a moment, then turned to Davis again. "You realize," she said quietly, "what you did today will be taught in classrooms." He blinked. "Ma'am. You enforced the rules when it wasn't easy. That's leadership." Davis straightened. "Thank you, ma'am. We all learned from this morning." The irony wasn't lost on her. The same humiliation at the main gate had saved the base 8 hours later. Sometimes failure teaches faster than success ever could. She looked back toward the fence line, now lined with spotlights. Beyond it, the world stretched into shadow. Somewhere out there, she thought, two men are running from a mistake they didn't plan to survive. She didn't envy them. She just hoped they'd be found before night swallowed their trail. By 2100 hours, the last reports were in. The FBI confirmed Morrison's ID was linked to a network of domestic saboteurs targeting military installations. Surveillance equipment had been found near the tree line, telephoto lenses, encrypted radios, maps. They'd been watching for weeks. Sarah stood near the gate as the evidence was packed up. The air had cooled, and for the first time all day, the base felt awake. Soldiers walked taller. Voices carried pride instead of complacency. Williams approached quietly. "Ma'am, all perimeters secured. No further contacts." She nodded. "Good work, Sergeant." He hesitated. "If I may, ma'am, you arriving the way you did, it changed things." Sarah smiled faintly. Maybe it just reminded everyone what their job really is. He considered that. Sometimes a reminder's all it takes. Long after the others left, she lingered. The floodlights buzzed softly, moths circling their pale halos. She looked down the empty road, where the fake officials had stood hours earlier. The thought came uninvited, it could have been worse, much worse. Then another softer one. It wasn't luck, it was readiness. Because vigilance, real vigilance, wasn't just procedure, it was belief. She whispered it to herself, almost prayer-like. Discipline saves lives. The desert wind carried the words away. And somewhere behind her, the flag atop headquarters snapped once in the cooling air, as if the base itself, the meeting, hadn't been over for 10 minutes when the knock came. Hard, urgent, the kind that told Sarah before the door even opened something was wrong. Staff Sergeant Williams stood there, breath controlled but eyes sharp. "Ma'am, we've got a situation at Gate 3. She didn't need details yet. The tone said enough. "What kind of situation?" "Unidentified vehicle, government plates. 3 occupants claiming to be Pentagon inspectors. No paperwork, no notice, and they're refusing to wait for verification." Sarah was already moving. "Are the guards following procedure?" "Yes, ma'am." That single answer tightened her focus like a lens, snapping into clarity. "Good, let's make sure it stays that way." They stepped into the afternoon glare. The base shimmered under the weight of heat, mirage lines blurring the distant fence. The vehicle hummed across the cracked asphalt toward the far gate. Williams briefed her in clipped sentences, professional but tense. "They say their names are Morrison, Tate, and Lennox. Morrison's doing the talking. Claims to be a deputy assistant secretary. Says the delay's unacceptable." Sarah stared out the windshield. Pentagon doesn't send deputies in sedans with no escort. "No, ma'am." "Then let's find out who they really are." Gate 3 came into view, a narrow road flanked by chain link and concrete barriers. Beyond it, a black government issue sedan idled in the no-man's land between outer and inner gates, the engine still running. 2 guards stood firm at the checkpoint, posture straight, rifles ready but relaxed, not aggressive, controlled. Sarah recognized one immediately from her earlier files, Corporal Davis. He'd been the exception, the one who got it right. "Good." She stepped out before the car had stopped moving. The heat hit like a wall, the air thick with the smell of dust and oil. "Corporal Davis," she called, "report." Davis turned, saluting. "Ma'am, these individuals are insisting on entry. We've denied until verification. We've already contacted Pentagon Directory and Inspector General's office for confirmation." Response: "None yet, ma'am." Sarah nodded. "Maintain posture. No one moves that gate until I say so." The man from the sedan was already striding toward her, tall, thin, silver hair catching the light. His suit was too sharp for this place. The desert dust hadn't even touched his shoes. He didn't wait for permission. "Are you the commanding officer?" "I am," she said simply. "Finally," he snapped. I'm Deputy Assistant Secretary Morrison, Department of Defense. These guards are obstructing an official inspection. Open the gate. Sarah didn't blink. Do you have authorization papers? Morrison's nostrils flared. Colonel, I don't have time for games. You're required to grant access to Pentagon inspectors on demand. She let the silence stretch. That's true, once we confirm you are Pentagon inspectors. His jaw tightened. Are you questioning the Department of Defense? I'm protecting it. The words were calm, precise, deliberate. Behind him, the two men near the car exchanged glances. One checked his watch, the other scanned the tree line. Sarah caught it in the corner of her eye and felt the faintest pulse of adrenaline. They were waiting for something. Sergeant Williams, she said quietly, run the plate on that vehicle. Contact base intel, full trace. Yes, ma'am. Morrison stepped closer, voice dropping. Colonel Martinez, you're making a serious mistake. When I report this to my superiors, there will be consequences. She studied him, her mind cataloging every inconsistency. Tone too aggressive, ID too quick to flash, the badge laminate too glossy, edges uneven. Cheap. Real Pentagon officials never acted insulted by security. They lived by it. She spoke softly, almost kindly. Sir, if you are who you say you are, this will take 5 minutes. If you're not, 5 minutes is more than you deserve. Morrison's eyes flickered, just for a heartbeat, but she saw it, the crack behind the mask. The radio on Davis's vest crackled. Gate 3, this is security control. Still no record of inspection scheduled for Henderson. Verifying credentials, stand by. Davis acknowledged, copy standing by. Sarah watched Morrison carefully. His two companions were growing restless, whispering now, their shoulders shifting. Sir, she said, I suggest you tell your men to stay by the vehicle. They're not my. He stopped himself too late. Sarah's voice dropped, almost a whisper. Then who are they? The sound of the radio cut through again. Control to Gate 3. Pentagon verification complete. No record of a Deputy Assistant Secretary Morrison. Repeat, no record found. No inspection scheduled anywhere in region. For a second, everything froze. Morrison's expression emptied. His skin went pale beneath the desert sun. Sir, Sarah said evenly, I'm going to have to ask you to remain here until we clarify this discrepancy. Morrison took one slow step backward. There's no discrepancy. There's been a misunderstanding. We'll just leave. Corporal Davis, she said, no one leaves this gate. Yes, ma'am. Williams was already on the radio. Military police, this is Gate 3. Immediate assistance. 3 suspects, fraudulent identification, possible infiltration attempt. The words carried through the open air like a flare. Morrison's companions moved first, bolting toward the brush beside the road. Hold your fire, Sarah shouted. No shots unless fired upon. 2 guards sprinted after them, the rustle of boots fading into the trees. Morrison turned to run, but Davis stepped in front of him, rifle lowered but firm. Sir, don't. Morrison froze, breathing hard. You don't understand, this isn't what you think. Sarah approached slowly, every sense tuned sharp. Then help me understand. He looked at her then, not as an officer, not as an opponent, but as someone who just realized the game was over. His voice cracked. We were supposed to get in quietly, that's all I know. Quietly for what? He didn't answer. The distant sound of sirens, military police vehicles, grew louder, closing in fast. Dust rose in spirals along the fence line. Sarah kept her eyes on him. You're done running, Mr. Morrison. He swallowed, shoulders sagging. It's not my name. The MPs arrived in a storm of gravel and flashing lights. 4 soldiers spilled out, weapons ready but controlled. The senior MP, Staff Sergeant Jackson, approached Sarah. Ma'am, situation. Suspect attempted unauthorized access. 2 accomplices fled east, fraudulent credentials confirmed. Jackson nodded, motioning to his team, "Cuff him." Morrison didn't resist. His voice, when it came, was almost pleading. "You don't understand. We were told the commander was compromised. We were supposed to." Sarah cut him off. "Save it for federal agents." The MPs led him toward the vehicle, securing his wrists with plastic restraints. The shift from arrogance to fear was almost instantaneous. Williams returned, breath measured. "Search teams are tracking the others, ma'am. Looks like they had secondary transport waiting near the outer road." Sarah exhaled, the weight of tension easing just enough to let the next thought surface. "If I hadn't come through that gate this morning, they might have gotten in." She glanced at Davis. "Corporal, you did everything right." "Just following the book, ma'am." "Exactly." She looked back at Morrison being loaded into the MP vehicle. "Sometimes the book saves lives." Within the hour, the checkpoint transformed into a controlled storm. Intel officers, MPs, and FBI liaisons arriving in unmarked SUVs. Radios buzzed. Drones circled overhead, scanning the perimeter. Sarah briefed the lead investigator, Special Agent Rebecca Chen, a sharp-eyed woman with calm authority. "So let me get this straight," Chen said. "You arrived unannounced this morning, discovered a lapse at Gate 1, corrected it, and by afternoon the same base prevented an infiltration at Gate 3. Sarah nodded. "Coincidence seems unlikely." Chen agreed. "We think your unexpected arrival threw off their timing. They were probably watching procedures, waiting for a window. So I disrupted their plan by accident." "Or instinct," Chen said. "Either way, it worked." The words should have felt satisfying. They didn't. Because beneath the relief was something else, a cold understanding of how close they'd come to disaster. By evening, the heat had faded into gold light. The chaos at the gate had settled into routine investigation, agents taking statements, MPs cataloging evidence. Morrison sat in the back of a transport, silent, hands cuffed, eyes hollow. His expensive suit looked wrong under the harsh orange glow. Sarah watched him for a moment, then turned to Davis again. "You realize," she said quietly, "what you did today will be taught in classrooms." He blinked. "Ma'am. You enforced the rules when it wasn't easy. That's leadership." Davis straightened. "Thank you, ma'am. We all learned from this morning." The irony wasn't lost on her. The same humiliation at the main gate had saved the base 8 hours later. Sometimes failure teaches faster than success ever could. She looked back toward the fence line, now lined with spotlights. Beyond it, the world stretched into shadow. Somewhere out there, she thought, 2 men are running from a mistake they didn't plan to survive. She didn't envy them. She just hoped they'd be found before night swallowed their trail. By 2100 hours, the last reports were in. The FBI confirmed Morrison's ID was linked to a network of domestic saboteurs targeting military installations. Surveillance equipment had been found near the tree line, telephoto lenses, encrypted radios, maps. They'd been watching for weeks. Sarah stood near the gate as the evidence was packed up. The air had cooled, and for the first time all day, the base felt awake. Soldiers walked taller. Voices carried pride instead of complacency. Williams approached quietly. "Ma'am, all perimeters secured. No further contacts." She nodded. "Good work, Sergeant." He hesitated. "If I may, ma'am, you arriving the way you did, it changed things." Sarah smiled faintly. Maybe it just reminded everyone what their job really is. He considered that. Sometimes a reminder's all it takes. Long after the others left, she lingered. The floodlights buzzed softly, moths circling their pale halos. She looked down the empty road, where the fake officials had stood hours earlier. The thought came uninvited, it could have been worse, much worse. Then another softer one. It wasn't luck, it was readiness. Because vigilance, real vigilance, wasn't just procedure, it was belief. She whispered it to herself, almost prayer-like. Discipline saves lives. The desert wind carried the words away. And somewhere behind her, the flag atop headquarters snapped once in the cooling air, as if the base itself had taken a breath. The base was finally quiet again. No sirens, no shouting, just the hum of generators and the low buzz of insects tracing circles under floodlights. Sarah stood at the window of her office long after midnight, watching the empty motor pool below. The asphalt gleamed faintly under sodium lamps, still wet from the evening's brief desert rain. She hadn't moved in nearly an hour. The adrenaline had long burned away, leaving something heavier behind. Not fear, not exhaustion. Responsibility. There's a weight that settles on a commander after the crisis ends. The stillness where every second replayed in the mind, every order measured, every outcome questioned. She made the right calls, she knew that, but knowing didn't always make believing easier. A knock came, gentle this time. "Enter," she said. Agent Rebecca Chen stepped inside, file folder in hand, hair pulled back in a neat tie that still hadn't loosened despite 20 hours of work. She moved like someone built for fatigue. "Colonel Martinez." "Agent." Chen set the folder on the desk. Preliminary interrogation transcript. Morrison finally talked. Sarah gestured for her to sit, though Chen remained standing. "What did he say?" "He was Pentagon, not even close. Real name's Peter Lang. Former contractor, terminated 2 years ago for data theft. He's part of a small cell targeting military installations, probing security weaknesses, selling access protocols." Sarah listened in silence. "They'd hit 3 smaller posts before this," Chen continued. "Never got far, but Henderson's size made it valuable. They planned to map your perimeter and communications infrastructure." Sarah folded her arms. "And today's attempt?" "Premature. Your arrival shifted the schedule. We think they panicked, tried to force entry before you changed procedures." So it was true. The simple decision to arrive unannounced had derailed an infiltration. A single variable, a coincidence wrapped in discipline. Chen watched her face. "You stopped something significant, Colonel. The Bureau's already escalating this to federal counterintel." Sarah nodded slowly. "Then they'll come back smarter." "Probably," Chen admitted, "but they'll find Henderson ready next time." A faint smile crossed the agent's face. "I've seen a lot of bases, Colonel. Most would still be writing reports at this hour. Yours is already rewriting its SOPs." Sarah glanced at the clock, 02:13. Soldiers learn fastest when the lesson is real. Chen closed the folder. "You know what you did this morning, showing up in civvies, might have saved the whole installation." "It also exposed it," Sarah said quietly. "That's how light works," Chen replied. "It shows everything, even the cracks." When Chen left, the silence returned, thicker now like fog. Sarah walked back to the window. In the reflection, her face looked older than the day before. Command had that effect. It didn't age the body, it aged the eyes. She thought of the 2 guards at Gate 1. They'd been careless, yes, but they'd also been human, young, tired, the kind of tired that routine breeds. She could have crushed them with punishment. Instead, she'd given them something rarer, responsibility. And today, because of that, others had done their jobs right. She smiled faintly. Sometimes discipline begins with forgiveness. At 300, she finally left the office. The corridor lights hummed quietly, the base slept. She walked alone, her footsteps echoing off the walls. Outside, the air was cool, the desert sky immense, stars sharp enough to cut the dark. She passed the hangars, the mess hall, the barracks, each building whispering with the faint noises of life at rest. At the main parade field, she stopped. A lone figure stood there, the glow of a cigarette ember tracing an orange arc in the dark. "Major Thompson," she called softly. He turned, startled, then stamped the cigarette out. Ma'am couldn't sleep. Neither could I. They stood side by side, watching the horizon. Hell of a first day, ma'am, Thompson said after a while. That's one way to describe it. He chuckled under his breath. Word is spreading, troops are talking. Half the base thinks you staged the whole thing on purpose. She looked at him. Did I? He shrugged. If you did, it worked. She didn't answer. Some myths are better left uncorrected. After a long pause, he asked, do you ever get used to it, the weight? Sarah glanced upward at the stars. You don't get used to it. You just learn how to carry it without breaking. Thompson nodded slowly, understanding more than he said. As he walked back toward the barracks, Sarah whispered to the night, that's leadership's secret, Major. Carry it quietly. Morning came pale and gold. The investigation wrapped with the precision of people who had done it too many times. Agents departed, vehicles rolled out, and life at Fob Henderson resumed its rhythm. But it was a different rhythm now. Soldiers walked straighter, voices carried softer, even the air seemed charged with awareness. Sarah spent the morning moving through checkpoints, every one of them. She didn't announce it, she just appeared, silent observer again. At each gate she saw new habits forming. Double checks, radio confirmations, eyes scanning horizons instead of phones. They were learning quickly. At Gate 3, she found Corporal Davis again, standing beside his partner. He saluted smartly, Ma'am. How's morale, Corporal? Hi, ma'am. Everyone's talking about yesterday. Kind of feels like we earned something back. You did. She handed him a small commendation slip, temporary citation pending formal paperwork. Keep setting the example. He blinked at it, speechless. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me. Thank the book you followed. He smiled, and for the first time in days, so did she. By afternoon, the base meeting room filled again, this time not with tension but focus. Senior staff assembled for the formal debrief. Hayes opened the session. Ma'am, security review complete. All gates now operating under updated verification. Training rotations adjusted. Sergeant Williams has scheduled random checks per your directive. Sarah listened, nodding. Good, and morale? Improving, Hayes said, fast. Major Thompson added, even the new recruits are quoting your line, ma'am. What line? He grinned. Sometimes the first test isn't the enemy outside the fence, it's the discipline inside it. They've been writing it on whiteboards. She shook her head, amused. Let's hope they remember it when it matters. Then more serious. We're not done. A culture doesn't change in a week, but we've started, and we'll keep going until excellence is habit again. Every officer in the room nodded. Something solid had settled between them, now trust, forged by a shared scare. After the meeting, Hayes lingered. Ma'am, I wanted to say I was wrong earlier. The gate incident at your arrival wasn't an embarrassment. It was exactly what we needed. Sarah looked at him. Failure teaches faster than comfort ever will. Yes, ma'am, but it takes the right teacher. He said it simply, respectfully, and left before she could answer. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty chairs. The quiet hum of the ceiling fan sounded almost like wind moving through open sky. Teacher. She hadn't thought of herself that way in years. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Sarah returned to her quarters. The desert turned to gold, then violet, then a deep blue that swallowed sound. She sat on the narrow bed, boots off, jacket folded neatly across her lap. On the nightstand lay a photograph, one she always carried but rarely looked at. A young lieutenant beside a Humvee, sand-blown smile, hand resting on the shoulder of a private barely 20. Both were alive then, only one was now. She ran a thumb over the image. That day, the day she'd lost him, had been routine. A safety oversight, a missed check on a convoy route. Small things, always small things. She promised herself she'd never let complacency take another life, and somewhere along the way, that promise had become purpose. Command isn't glory, she thought. It's stewardship of lives, of trust, of the unseen threads that hold a unit together. She closed her eyes. The hum of the base drifted through the thin walls, vehicles moving, radios crackling, soldiers laughing quietly outside. Alive sounds. That was enough. Near midnight, she walked once more to the outer fence. The desert wind had cooled. The sky was a river of stars. She reached the same spot where Morrison's car had idled less than 24 hours earlier. The tire marks were still faintly visible, pressed into the dirt like scars that would soon fade. She crouched, tracing a line in the dust with her finger. This could have gone differently. If Davis had wavered, if Williams had hesitated, if she had arrived one day later, the story would have ended another way. Leadership, she thought, wasn't about being everywhere at once. It was about building people who didn't need you to be. She stood, eyes on the horizon. Tomorrow would bring new routines, new drills, new reports. But tonight, she allowed herself a rare moment of stillness, a breath between battles. Because command was never really about crisis. It was about what you built after it. Back in her office, she opened her notebook, the old leather one she carried from base to base. She wrote just one line beneath the date. Security isn't suspicion, it's respect for what you protect. She underlined it once, closed the cover and turned off the light. Outside, the flag rustled softly in the night wind, and somewhere a guard called a status check into the radio, calm, confident, alert. For the first time since arriving at Henderson, Sarah believed it. The base was awake again. The sun rose clean and cold. No alarms, no sirens, just the steady rhythm of a base that had finally remembered how to breathe. Sarah was already awake. She'd been walking the perimeter since before first light, boots sinking into damp earth, breath fogging faintly in the chill. Every post she passed offered the same sight: alert faces, squared shoulders, quiet nods. Something had shifted. They weren't simply doing their jobs now. They believed in why those jobs mattered. She stopped by the east checkpoint where Rodriguez, one of the guards who'd failed her the first morning, was on duty. He straightened immediately. "Ma'am." "At ease, Private." He hesitated, then relaxed a fraction. "Gate secure, ma'am. Double-check the verification lists, alarms tested, comms line clear." Sarah studied him for a moment. The nervousness was still there, but so was something else: focus. "Good," she said quietly. "Keep it that way." As she turned to leave, he blurted, "Ma'am, thank you for not ending my career." Sarah paused. "You ended the bad habits instead. That's worth more." Then she walked on, leaving him standing taller than before. By the time she returned to headquarters, the base was fully alive, vehicles roaring to life, the flag rising with crisp ceremony, boots striking pavement in perfect rhythm. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes was waiting near the steps. His face carried the calm of a man who'd finally slept, but still expected the day to test him. "Morning, ma'am," he greeted. "Pentagon team just radioed in. They'll be here within the hour." Sarah stopped mid-stride. "Inspection." "Official review, ma'am. They said it's routine." It never was. "Names." "Colonel Finch and Commander Ree from the Defense Oversight Division." Sarah inhaled slowly. "I know Finch. He's not routine about anything." Hayes gave a thin smile. "Should I cancel your coffee order then?" She almost laughed. "Almost. No, make it stronger." Inside her office, she reviewed files one last time: incident reports, security logs, training updates. Every detail ready, every loose thread tightened. Still, she could feel the pressure building in the quiet like static. Pentagon oversight wasn't about curiosity. It was about accountability. One misstep, One flaw in the chain and command careers vanished. A soft knock. Major Thompson stepped in, his tone respectful but uncertain. "Ma'am, do you want me present during the briefing?" "Yes," she said. "All section heads, too. They deserve to stand in front of what they've built." He nodded and left. Sarah exhaled, looking again at the photograph on her desk, the young lieutenant and the private. She whispered to the memory, "Let's see if today proves we've learned." The inspectors arrived precisely on schedule. The sedan rolled through Gate 1. Slowly this time, credentials verified 3 different ways. Sarah watched from the headquarters steps, nodding with quiet satisfaction the procedure executed flawlessly. Corporal Davis stood at the gate, calm, confident, commanding. Every salute, every radio confirmation precise. By the time the vehicle reached the administrative building, Sarah already knew the first half of her test was passed. Colonel Finch stepped out first, a tall man with the posture of someone who measured respect in eye contact. Commander Ree followed, tablet in hand, expression neutral. "Colonel Martinez," Finch said, "quite an introduction you've made here." She met his gaze evenly. "I hear you've read the reports." "I have, twice." His eyes softened just slightly. "I'll admit they're remarkable and concerning. A near breach, an internal failure, and a full recovery in under 24 hours. "Sir," she replied, "that's not just recovery. That's proof the system works when people do." Finch smiled faintly. "Let's see if it still does." The inspection began like a symphony of questions, measured, relentless. They walked the perimeter first. Finch asked about guard rotations, surveillance feeds, maintenance logs. Rechecked access lists, tested communications encryption, timed response drills. Sarah answered everything calmly, precisely. When she didn't have an answer, she had a plan. At one point, Finch stopped beside the security booth at Gate 3, running a gloved hand along the counter. "You handled quite a scene here, Colonel." "Yes, sir." "Tell me, why didn't you let the men who failed you at Gate 1 go?" Sarah looked him squarely in the eye. "Because failure isn't contagious unless you hide it. They learned, and the base learned with them." Ree's stylus paused mid-note. Finch regarded her for a moment, then nodded once. They moved to the operations center next. Large monitors glowed with live feeds, maps, readiness charts. "Show me the new protocol," Finch said. Williams stepped forward confidently. "All entry points now require dual authentication, sir. ID scan and command-level verification. Randomization ensures no predictable check times." Finch nodded, impressed. "And drills?" "Every 72 hours, unannounced." Sarah added quietly, "Complacency doesn't survive surprise." That line drew a faint grin from Ree. "We may steal that for headquarters training slides." "Be my guest," Sarah said. Hours passed. The tour stretched through barracks, training fields, and the command post. Everywhere they went, soldiers straightened, procedures flowed, professionalism radiated. Finch finally turned to her as they crossed the courtyard. "You've done more in 3 days than some bases manage in 6 months." Sarah shook her head. "The soldiers did it. They just needed someone to remind them what right looks like." Ree glanced up from her notes. "Command climate evaluations reflect a 30% morale increase. That's not procedure, Colonel. That's leadership." Sarah offered a quiet smile. "Leadership's just attention paid long enough to become trust." Finch studied her for a beat. "You sound like someone who's carried failure before." Her eyes darkened slightly. "Everyone who's worth following has." He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. Back in the conference room, they concluded the inspection. Finch closed his tablet, the faint click loud in the hush. "Colonel Martinez," he said, "the Pentagon will classify yesterday's infiltration attempt as a high-risk intercept successfully neutralized. Your command decisions will be entered into the training archive." Ree added, We'd like to request your cooperation in developing a case study, leadership under crisis conditions. Sarah blinked, surprised. You want to turn Henderson into a classroom example? Finch smiled. For once, yes, for what worked. She exhaled, the tension she hadn't acknowledged leaving her shoulders. Then, let's make sure we include the part about what didn't. Finch nodded, genuine respect in his eyes. Understood, Colonel. Sometimes success is just failure that got corrected fast enough. They exchanged salutes, sharp and clean. After the inspectors left, the base felt lighter, as though the very air recognized the passing of judgment. Hayes joined her on the steps, a grin breaking through his usual discipline. You just turned an investigation into a commendation, ma'am. Sarah smiled faintly. Let's not celebrate until the paperwork arrives. Still, he said, the troops saw it. They saw what right looks like from the top down. She looked out across the parade ground, soldiers marching in sync, voices calling cadence strong and steady. They saw what it looks like when standards mean safety again, she said. Late afternoon bled into evening. The base glowed with golden dust as the sun dipped low. Sarah found herself near the training yard, where younger recruits practiced checkpoint procedures. Their instructor barked commands: verify, confirm, challenge, respond. She watched quietly, unnoticed. One recruit hesitated on a simulated ID check, fumbling the scanner. The instructor started to correct him, but Sarah raised a hand. Let him try again. The recruit steadied, focused, got it right the second time. Sarah nodded. That's how you learn. Mistakes you fix yourself don't repeat. The young soldier flushed with pride. Yes, ma'am. That night the mess hall buzzed louder than usual. Laughter, energy, the low hum of pride that spreads after recognition. Rumors had already reached the rank and file. The Pentagon inspection passed with distinction. Sarah ate quietly in a corner booth, watching her people. The same ones who, 2 days ago, avoided eye contact now filled the room with motion and conversation. Major Thompson sat across from her, tray half empty. Feels different, doesn't it? It does, she said. He smirked. You realize the story about you showing up undercover's already legend. They're calling it Operation Black Blazer. She couldn't help a small laugh. I've been called worse. Thompson leaned in, serious now. You gave them something we can't teach in manuals: ownership. Sarah stirred her coffee. You can teach it, just costs more patience than most have. When she finally left the hall, the night air was cool again. She wandered toward the outer fence, the same path as before, each step slow, reflective. The floodlights hummed overhead. Beyond them the desert stretched vast, silent, indifferent. She thought about Morrison, now in federal custody, and the strange symmetry of it all. A base once defined by carelessness, now teaching vigilance to others. In her pocket her phone buzzed. A message from Agent Chen. Network dismantled. Your people saved more than just one base. Thought you should know. Sarah read it twice, then tucked the phone away. Sometimes victories arrived quietly, like whispers. Back at her office, she wrote another line in her notebook beneath last night's entry. Strength is what stops a threat. Strength is what prevents the next one. She closed the book, turned off the lamp, and sat for a moment in the dark, listening to the steady, disciplined rhythm of the night patrol checking in over comms. Each voice calm, confident. And for the first time since stepping through Henderson's gate, Sarah didn't feel the weight of watching over them. She felt the pride of trusting them. 3 months later, the desert looked different. Not greener, just steadier. The sand still blew in restless swirls across the perimeter road, but the base behind the fence moved with a rhythm that felt almost musical. Engines started on time. Voices carried confidence instead of hesitation. Every salute snapped like a promise kept. Fob Henderson, once whispered about for its failures, now had visitors. Convoys rolled in from other installations, carrying officers and NCOs who came to learn how a broken command had turned itself into a model of discipline. Sarah watched them from her office window, coffee cooling in her hand. The convoy dust hung golden in the morning sun. It looked like pride taking physical form. Hayes knocked lightly and stepped in. "Ma'am, first session begins in 30. Auditorium's packed." She smiled. "Packed? I didn't think the words security protocol seminar drew crowds." He grinned. "Apparently your reputation does." Sarah shook her head, amused. "Let's hope they came for the lesson, not the legend." The base auditorium hadn't seen this many uniforms in years. Rows of officers from across the region filled the seats. Army, Air Force, even Allied advisors from overseas. Cameras, notebooks, the restless murmur of people expecting revelation. Major Thompson opened the session. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Regional Security Leadership Conference. Our host, Colonel Sarah Martinez." Applause rose, polite but genuine. Sarah walked to the podium with the unhurried calm of someone who no longer needed to prove she belonged. She looked out over the sea of faces, then spoke softly. 3 months ago, this base failed a simple test. A woman in civilian clothes walked to our gate, and no one stopped her. The room went silent. She let the pause settle, the memory sting. "That woman was me." Nervous laughter rippled, then faded when they saw she wasn't joking. That failure exposed everything, our habits, our shortcuts, our excuses. But it also revealed our potential. Because within 24 hours, the same soldiers who failed me stopped a real infiltration. She stepped away from the microphone now, speaking without notes. "I didn't fix this base. They did. What I did was simple. I told the truth and refused to let comfort win." Her voice softened. "If you remember nothing else today, remember this. Security isn't suspicion. It's respect for what you protect." The room stayed quiet, pens frozen, every ear catching each measured word. After the presentation, officers crowded her with questions. How did she enforce accountability without fear? How did she rebuild morale? What punishment worked best? Sarah answered none of those directly. Instead, she said, "Discipline doesn't come from punishment, it comes from participation. People guard what they help build." Some understood immediately. Others would need to see it for themselves. As the crowd dispersed, one young captain lingered. "Ma'am," he said, voice uncertain, "I inherited a unit that's drifting. They listen when I'm angry but not when I'm calm. How did you make yours care?" Sarah studied him. The question took her back to herself at 27, learning that authority shouted was authority already lost. She said quietly, "Stop talking first. Listen longer than they expect. And when you speak again, mean every word." He nodded thoughtful. She added, "And don't expect gratitude, expect growth." He saluted, gratitude shining anyway. Later that afternoon, the visiting officers toured the base. Davis, now wearing sergeant stripes, led a demonstration at Gate 3. "Step 1, challenge. Step 2, verify. Step 3, confirm through chain before clearance," he instructed. His voice was steady, his posture proud but not arrogant. Watching from the shade, Sarah felt an unfamiliar tug in her chest. Pride, yes, but something deeper, vindication. Rodriguez stood nearby assisting recruits, every movement precise. The same soldier who once ignored her now teaching others how to never repeat it. When the demonstration ended, one foreign observer clapped softly. "Your people are alert in a way ours are not. They move like they know why." Sarah smiled. "That's the hardest thing to teach, the why." Evening approached with the kind of light painters try to steal, amber sliding to rose. Sarah sat outside the command building, a folder of conference notes beside her, the desert wind cool against her face. Agent Chen arrived in civilian clothes, smiling as she approached. I heard your speech is trending on the Pentagon intranet. You're famous, Colonel. I'd rather be useful. Chen laughed. Fame, just the noisy version of that. They walked along the perimeter road. Beyond the wire, the desert stretched endless and empty, as if waiting for the next lesson. Chen's tone shifted. The Morrison investigation's officially closed. His network's gone. Your protocols helped catch 2 more cells. You didn't just fix a base, you shifted doctrine. Sarah slowed her steps. Doctrine is what saves people, attention does. Chen looked at her, studying the tired eyes beneath the composure. When's the last time you rested? Sarah smiled faintly. After the next inspection. Spoken like every commander I've ever met, Chen said, shaking her head. That night the conference banquet filled the mess hall with laughter and clinking glasses. Officers mingled with Henderson's soldiers, equals for once, not ranks. Stories traded, lessons compared, humility earned the hard way. Hayes raised a toast to the commander who reminded us that vigilance is a habit, not a headline. Applause thundered. Sarah lifted her glass slightly, the gesture modest. To the people who proved it, she said. The cheer that followed was louder still. Afterward she slipped outside alone. The base lights glowed soft behind her. The night air smelled of dust and jet fuel and something faintly metallic. The sounds of celebration faded to a distant hum. She walked toward the edge of the airfield where the wind cut sharper and the stars burned clearer. This place had once embarrassed her, now it humbled her. She thought of the young captain's question earlier, how do you make them care? The truth was simpler than she'd said aloud. You show them you care first. You keep showing it long after they stop thanking you. That's command. That's the quiet exchange that keeps soldiers alive. She sat on a concrete barrier, staring at the endless dark horizon. Leadership wasn't a speech. It was a series of small corrections no one applauded for, until one day they did because they'd finally understood why. Just before midnight, Hayes found her still there. Couldn't sleep, he asked. Didn't try. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets. You know, when they told us 3 months ago a new commander was coming, I expected another checklist officer, not someone who'd change how we breathe. She chuckled softly. I didn't plan on changing air supply, Colonel. You did anyway. They both looked toward the outer fence. The floodlights hummed, guards paced with steady precision. Hayes said quietly, I used to think discipline was pressure. Now I think it's protection. Sarah turned to him. That's the line you'll teach next. He smiled, maybe. Inside headquarters, the conference banners already hung for tomorrow's sessions. From complacency to command, case study Fob Henderson. The title made her uneasy, not because it was wrong, but because it sounded too finished, and nothing about leadership ever really finished. She opened her notebook again, the same one filled with the quiet sentences of her journey. Tonight she added a new one, beneath all the rest. Excellence isn't achieved. It's maintained every morning by whoever stands the post. She closed the cover gently. At dawn, the first light spread across the tarmac like a promise. The conference delegates assembled for a final tour before departure. Cameras clicked. Soldiers stood proud. When it ended, Finch, the inspector from months ago, approached her with a small smile. Colonel, the secretary sends his regards. Your methods are now part of standard readiness training. Sarah nodded, humbled. Make sure they teach the context, not the legend. Finch laughed. You still hate praise. I just prefer precision. He extended a hand. Then here's a precise statement. Well done. She shook it. Thank you, sir. When the last convoy departed, the base returned to its own pulse, quieter, steadier, stronger. Sarah watched the dust clouds fade into the horizon and felt an ache that was equal parts pride and fatigue. Henderson was no longer hers alone. It belonged to every soldier who'd stood a little straighter, every guard who'd chosen procedure over assumption. She turned toward headquarters, the flag snapping above her in the desert wind. This is what command is, she thought. You build something so others can keep it standing after you leave. And for a moment, just one brief human moment, she let herself feel the rarest emotion in uniform. Peace. The orders came on a Thursday morning. A simple envelope hand-delivered by courier. No ceremony, no warning. Inside, her transfer papers. Colonel Sarah Martinez, effective in 4 weeks, would assume command of Joint Training Command, Western Division. It was a promotion. A bigger stage. And it felt like loss. She sat in silence for a long moment, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. The desk before her was neat, everything in its place. Outside, the base she'd rebuilt moved like a living thing, steady, confident, awake. She should have been proud. Instead, she felt the faint ache that comes when a story ends too soon. Hayes entered quietly, reading her expression before he saw the papers. They're moving you, aren't they? Sarah nodded. He exhaled. They always move the good ones too fast. She looked up at him. Henderson doesn't need me anymore. That's not the point. It's exactly the point, she said softly. If they still needed me, I wouldn't have done my job. Word spread fast. Soldiers congratulated her with pride they didn't try to hide. But behind every handshake and salute was the same unspoken question. What happens when you're gone? She didn't answer it aloud. She didn't need to. Instead, she began preparing them for it. Daily briefings became mentorship sessions. She walked the lines, not inspecting anymore, but teaching. She had Davis lead training drills solo. Rodriguez supervised security simulations. Williams ran after-action reviews. Every decision she made now aimed at one quiet goal: make herself unnecessary. It was the only way to leave right. One evening, as the sun bled across the desert, she found Sergeant Davis packing outside the command post, jaw tight, radio clenched. "What's wrong?" she asked. He hesitated. One of the new recruits. He froze during a live check exercise, nearly let a civilian contractor through without confirmation. Sarah folded her arms. Was it carelessness or fear? Fear, ma'am. He said he didn't want to make a scene if the guy was legit. She nodded slowly. Bring him here. Minutes later, a young private stood before her, nervous, eyes fixed on the floor. Sarah's voice stayed calm. You hesitated. Yes, ma'am. Why? He swallowed. Because the man looked confident, like he belonged. I didn't want to embarrass the base if I was wrong. She took a step closer. Do you know what almost embarrassed this base 3 months ago? He shook his head. A confident liar, she said quietly, and a guard who didn't want to cause trouble. The recruit's eyes widened. Sarah softened her tone. You didn't fail today. You revealed what still needs training. That's what drills are for. But next time you speak up, you act, even if your voice shakes. Yes, ma'am. As he left, Davis looked at her. That sounded familiar. It should, she said. You once heard it yourself. He smiled faintly. Full circle, ma'am. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She walked the perimeter alone, like she had on her first day. Every post she passed reminded her of the journey. The gates that once faltered, the soldiers who'd grown under her watch, the mistakes that had turned into lessons. She paused at Gate 3, the place where it all changed. The fence hummed faintly in the wind, the lights throwing pale halos on the asphalt. Davis's voice came over the radio in the booth, calm and precise. Gate 3 secure, all systems green. She smiled to herself. Maybe this is what legacy feels like, she thought. Not applause, continuity. The next morning, the official announcement came through channels. Her replacement had been selected. Colonel James O'Neill, logistics specialist, solid record, fair reputation. Hayes briefed her privately. He's good, ma'am, different style but good. Different is fine, she said, as long as the Corps stays. That afternoon, she called a base-wide assembly. Soldiers gathered in the courtyard under the hot white sky, ranks stretching back to the flagpole. Sarah stepped forward, hands behind her back, voice clear but steady. In 4 weeks I'll be leaving Henderson. Some of you have already heard. I wanted you to hear it from me. A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd, but she continued. When I arrived, we were a unit that forgot what it meant to watch the gate, to watch each other. Now look at you. She paused, scanning their faces, stronger, prouder, awake. You built something here that doesn't need me anymore, and that's the greatest success a commander can hope for. Silence, then applause, slow, spreading, unstoppable. She raised a hand. Don't thank me, just keep it alive. The sound swelled again, louder, carrying across the courtyard like a promise. In the days that followed, she began handing over files, walking O'Neill through systems, processes, and the culture she'd fought to restore. He listened closely, respectful but pragmatic. You run a tight ship, Colonel, he said. It'll be a challenge to maintain. It's not about tight, she corrected. It's about clear. Every soldier knows why they do what they do. Keep that and they'll carry you. O'Neill nodded, making notes. I'll try to honor what you've built. Don't honor it, she said quietly. Evolve it. The last week came faster than expected. Sarah found herself packing in silence one evening. Books, files, the photograph of her and the young private. She paused on that picture again. For years it had haunted her. Now it didn't hurt the same way. It reminded her why she had chosen this life. Duty wasn't about perfection. It was about perseverance. She placed the photo carefully in her bag. Her final day dawned clear and windless. The base lined up at attention along the runway, rows of soldiers, salutes held high. A small ceremony, simple by design. Hayes read her citation aloud. Commendations for leadership, commendations for crisis management, commendations for exceptional restoration of operational readiness. When it ended, Sarah stepped forward for one last address. She looked at them all, the veterans, the new recruits, the ones who'd stumbled and grown. Every face was a story now. Her voice came soft but sure. When I first walked through your gate, no one knew who I was. That was my test for you, but what followed became a test for me. She took a breath. You showed me that failure isn't final, that strength isn't loud, and that leadership, real leadership, isn't about control, it's about belief. Her throat tightened, but she didn't pause. I leave this base with one request. Don't let the next mistake take root in silence. Speak, correct, protect, and never forget discipline isn't punishment, it's respect. A stillness fell. Then, almost at once, 100 hands lifted in salute. Sarah returned it slowly. Her eyes shimmered in the sunlight, but her voice stayed firm. Dismissed. Hours later, her convoy waited by the same gate where it had all begun. Gate 1. The place of her first humiliation. But this time every guard stood alert, every form precise, every salute perfect. Davis was there too, waiting. Permission to walk you out, ma'am. She smiled, permission granted. They walked together to the vehicle. He said quietly, You changed us, ma'am. Even after you go, we'll still hear your voice when we check the gate. She looked at him, really looked. Then I did my job. Before stepping inside, she turned once more to the base. The flag rippled gently. The wind carried faint echoes of cadence calls from the training yard. It was alive. As the convoy rolled out, Sarah watched the fences blur past, each one a memory. When the base disappeared into the distance, she leaned back and let her eyes close. The voice in her head wasn't command anymore. It was reflection. You can't hold on to a post forever. You just hold it long enough to make sure it stands when you're gone. The horizon opened before her, vast, golden, endless. She smiled softly, whispering to herself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And somewhere far behind, at a gate now forever guarded by vigilance, a young soldier checked an ID and remembered her words. 6 months later, the desert was gone. The horizon outside Sarah's new office stretched into forest and mountain, tall pines instead of sand, fog instead of heat. Joint Training Command, Western Division. A place built not for battle, but for beginnings. Cadets marched in formation across the parade grounds below, their movements uneven but earnest. They were young, too young to understand what those movements would one day mean. Sarah watched them from the window with the same mix of pride and worry that had followed her all her life, the dual weight of command and compassion. A knock came. Major Patel stepped in, clipboard in hand. "Ma'am, the new training rotation's ready for review." "Thank you," she said, scanning the papers quickly. "And the new security drills." "Implemented last week, ma'am. We modeled them off the Henderson Protocol." Sarah paused mid-page. "You did?" "Yes, ma'am. The manual they distributed from your case study, well, it's already standard curriculum now." She set the clipboard down, something warm flickering beneath her composure. "Good." Patel smiled. "They're calling it the Martinez model." Sarah rolled her eyes lightly. "That's excessive." "Maybe," Patel said, "but it works." The day passed in a steady rhythm of briefings, reports, and new recruits arriving through the gates, wide-eyed, nervous, unaware of the history that now carried their lessons. By evening, the fog had thickened into silver sheets, drifting across the base. Sarah walked the perimeter like always, habit more than inspection. The guards saluted her, crisp and alert, each one a reminder that no system, no structure, truly survives without people who care. At the far corner of the fence line, a young cadet stood alone, shifting uneasily beside the checkpoint. "Everything all right, cadet?" Sarah asked. He startled slightly, then straightened. "Yes, ma'am, just thinking, ma'am, about vigilance drills." "Thinking? Good," she said. "What about them?" "Well, they tell us to challenge anyone who approaches without proper ID. But, what if it's a senior officer? What if I'm wrong?" Sarah smiled softly. "Then you'll apologize after you've confirmed." He blinked. "Ma'am. Caution isn't disrespect, cadet. It's loyalty performed quietly. The right officer will understand that." He nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." As she walked away, she felt the smallest ripple of pride. Somewhere, Corporal Davis would have smiled at that answer too. That night after the lights-out call, Sarah sat alone in her quarters. The window was cracked open. Cold air drifted in, carrying the faint smell of pine and rain. Her desk was bare except for the old leather notebook and the photograph, the same one she'd carried from base to base, war to war. She opened the notebook, its pages filled with short, quiet truths written over years of command. At the last page, she began a new entry. "Legacy isn't what they remember you for. It's what they continue without needing your name." She stopped, staring at the ink until it dried. In the stillness, she heard faint laughter from the barracks outside, young voices, full of energy and hope. She smiled. That sound, she thought, is the future breathing. The next morning, she stood before a class of new officers. Rows of eager faces, notebooks ready. Her lecture topic, Command Integrity in Crisis. She began not with a quote or statistic, but a question. Who here thinks leadership is about confidence? Half the hands went up. Who thinks it's about control? A few more. She nodded, both good answers, both wrong. The room stilled. "Leadership," she said slowly, "is about conscience. It's the ability to choose what's right before it's easy, and to keep choosing it when no one thanks you for it. Silence followed. She let it hang, then continued softer, almost like a memory being shared. Years ago, I arrived at a base that had forgotten its purpose. They thought rules were obstacles, not armor, so I reminded them discipline isn't about restriction, it's about respect. A cadet raised his hand. Did they listen, ma'am? She smiled faintly. Eventually, but not because I shouted, because I stayed. The room stayed silent. They were listening the way Henderson had learned too, with respect born of stillness. After class, one of the younger instructors approached her, hesitant. Ma'am, I just wanted to say, my brother served at Henderson. He said after you left, things didn't just stay good, they got better. Sarah blinked. Better? Yes, ma'am. They still run your protocols. He said the new commander carries your notebook in his desk, the one you left behind. She froze. He found that. The instructor nodded. He says there's one line underlined twice. Security isn't suspicion. It's respect for what you protect. They've made it the base motto. For a long moment, Sarah couldn't speak. She just nodded slowly, eyes glistening with quiet pride. Tell your brother, she said softly. That's the best report I've ever received. That evening, the clouds broke. The setting sun poured across the training grounds, golden light striking the cadets as they ran drills. Their movements were still awkward, imperfect, but determined. Sarah stood by the edge of the field, watching. Patel joined her. They're getting faster, she said. They're getting steadier, Sarah corrected. Speed follows purpose. Patel chuckled. You ever stop teaching, ma'am? Sarah smiled. No, and neither should you. Later, as night settled in and the base quieted, Sarah climbed to the rooftop observation deck overlooking the valley. Below, the floodlights traced neat lines across the fences, the towers, the dorms. From this height, everything looked orderly, controlled. But she knew better. Beneath every rule and rotation were human hearts, flawed, brave, hopeful. That's what command really meant, guiding chaos, not erasing it. She leaned against the railing, eyes on the far horizon. In the distance, thunder rolled softly. And for a brief moment, the wind carried a sound that made her chest tighten. The faint rhythm of cadence calls, echoing in memory. Voices shouting together in the desert sun. The gates of Henderson. The guards she'd once doubted, now guarding the next generation. She smiled, closing her eyes. They're fine without me. A week later, her inbox held a message marked urgent. It was from Sergeant Davis. Subject, status report, you be proud. She opened it. Ma'am. Thought you'd want to know. Yesterday, a civilian tried to bluff entry during delivery. New recruit followed procedure exactly. Didn't let him through until verification. When we asked him what made him react that way, he said, because Colonel Martinez once got stopped at this gate, and everyone learned from it. I figured you appreciate the full circle. Respectfully, Sergeant Davis. Sarah read the message twice, then a third time. Her throat tightened. A single tear fell onto the edge of the keyboard, vanishing before it could stain. She leaned back, exhaling slowly. Sometimes the universe sends its confirmations quietly, not in medals, but in moments. That night she walked one last round before lights out. Fog curled through the trees, soft and cold. Every distant radio check, every footstep on the gravel, felt like a heartbeat she'd helped create. She whispered into the still air. This is how leadership ends, not with applause but with continuation. The flag snapped once in the wind. She stood at attention, saluted it alone, and whispered one final truth to the night. Strength remembered is safety preserved. Then she turned off the lights, closed the door behind her, and walked away, not from duty, but toward peace. And far away, at a desert base under a brighter sky, a guard checked an ID, smiled faintly to himself, and said the words she'd left behind. Security isn't suspicion, it's respect for what you protect.